Welcome to week 5 of ARTFX Tutorial Tuesday, a weekly video series about music production with Ableton Live. You might have noticed the official Loopmasters discount code at the start of this video. Use it to get a nice 10% discount on all Loopmasters products. Also, I highly recommend watching this video in 1080p so you got a clear view of what I'm doing. Last week we used some hi-hat loops to create an interesting percussion pattern, and this week we're going to continue using loops. This time it's all going to be about a technique that has been made popular lately by artists like Skrillex and Feed Me, but has been used a lot by other artists as well. A good example might be FX Twin. So today we're going to import a vocal sample into a project, chop this sample in smaller chops so we can rearrange them, and rearrange these chops into something more musical. Okay, so last week I released the Ableton Live skin I use in these tutorials as a free download on the ARTFX website. So for all of you freebie lovers, you can find the link in the description box below this video. Now, here we have our project from last week. A simple house beat with some chords, an arpeggiated lead, a funky glitchy hi-hat pattern and some white noise. But in the end it still sounds boring, so we need some kind of a hook. This is the part of which listeners might be able to recognize your track and say like, hey, this is my ARTFX, right? Of course, replacing my name with yours. So a lot of times the hook in a track can be anything from a vocal sample right before the drop to an insane melody solo, but for now we're making a combination of both. Today we dive into the world of vocal chopping or vocal cutting to create a very interesting pattern that is going to be the hook in this track. So let's play this and see what we've got so far. Now, if you have watched my previous videos, you already know that for this track we've chosen the A minor scale to work with. So the best would be to find a vocal sample or an acapella that is recorded within the A minor scale. But if you don't have one in A minor, then any sample within a minor scale will work, whatever the root note is. You can always pitch the sample to the right key, but I'll show you that within a minute. So, for this particular tutorial I took a Loopmasters sample pack called Iconical Vocal Acapellas, which features multiple multi-layer acapellas ready for you to work with. You can find the link to the product in the description box below, and remember, if you buy it, don't forget the 10% discount code. So the first thing we're going to do is search this sample library for a vocal within A minor scale. Note that the scale is in the title of the WAV files. So this one is in the scale of D minor. So let's drag this to arrangement to automatically create a new audio track, and let's also turn off the synth group for now. So this sample is not in the right scale, so I'll show you how to change this to an A minor scale in two ways. First, let's open up a MIDI clip so I can visually show you what I mean. This vocal is in the scale of D minor, so to make this an A minor we can transpose it down. Now let's see how many semitones that is. One, 2, 3, 4. And 5. So that means from a D to an A note is 5 semitones down. So if we now double click our audio clip, it opens up at the bottom of our screen, and here we can find the option to transpose our audio clip up or down in semitones. Put this on -5 and now we have the same vocal in an A minor scale, which probably sounds like a really bad male voice.
Sex and drugs and alcohol, I couldn't wait to do them all. Sex and drugs and alcohol, I couldn't wait to do them all.
So the other method is by transposing it up instead of down. So let's find out how many semitones it is from a D note to the next A note while playing upwards on a piano. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7 semitones. So let's go back to our audio clip and now we transpose it to +7 semitones. Now it probably sounds more like Alvin the Chipmunk.
Sex and drugs and alcohol, I couldn't wait to do them all. Sex and drugs and alcohol, I couldn't wait to do them all.
So that's just a short way of getting a right sample for the skill you're working with, and normally I wouldn't pitch my vocals this extremely, but when you're going to chop it up, it doesn't really matter. And the cool thing with this pack is that every acapella consists of multiple versions of the vocal, like a dry and wet version, or even a backing track or chorus and verse. Really cool and helpful if you need some more vocal chops with the same sound. Now, let's see what else we have in this pack, since I would like to stay away from this extreme pitching for this track, so something between a G minor and a B minor will be good. Let's see, this one is in a G major, so we can't use this. This is a C sharp minor, which might be useful if there is nothing closer to the A minor. C sharp, F sharp, and look, here we have an A minor scale, and the last folder is also an A minor scale. So we've got two folders to choose from. Let's see.
So look straight in. So look too good to be true. So look straight into my eyes. Too good to be true. I was. When I'm standing. Sing to me, sing to me, sing to me. Sing to me.
This one sounds pretty useful for a track, since it's a dry version of the vocal, so we can add our own reverb at the end. Let's drag this to our audio track and start chopping it up. First, what I like to do is open this audio clip and find this little button called Ref. This reverses the audio sample. I find that when I cut my vocals from a reversed vocal, I can sometimes get really interesting results. Now, let's listen to how this vocal sounds when it's reversed. Pretty cool, huh? Now, I'm going to use the built-in slicer in Ableton, which slices the selected audio clip in separate clips and throws them all together in one drum rack, so you can play them on your MIDI controller. Actually, let's duplicate this over to the right and have one normal and one reverse sample. Select them both and hit Ctrl+J on your keyboard to consolidate them in one new audio clip. Now, select the loop, right-click the selection and hit Slice to New MIDI Track. Now the slicer window opens up. Here you can select whether to cut on 8 notes or 1/4 notes or whatnot. Now a drum rack has 128 slots in it, just like a sampler has 128 slots for each piano key. So if we cut our 32 bar loop in 1/4 notes, it results in exactly 128 slices, and thus it fills up the entire drum rack. Now hit OK and a new MIDI track will be created. Finally, delete the audio track since we don't need it anymore. Now, the fun part starts, and from here on you'll hear me a lot less talking. Just watch what I do and how I try to find an interesting melody or progression made out of this vocal chops. This is mostly a trial and error process, and it can be very time consuming. Just don't rush yourself in making this. So if we now play this, it sounds just like before. So let's open up the MIDI clip and delete all the notes so we can start putting in our own. So if I now play my MIDI controller, you can hear the actual vocal chops. Now it's time to find a good chop to start with. First, let's make this loop a little shorter so we don't have to fill in this entire 32 bars. Now let's start adding in our first notes and see what we can come up with. So this first couple of notes are starting to take shape already. Now let's go on with the next couple of notes. I'm just trying to find chops that go well with each other. Now, this is the most hard part of this actual video. Now, I don't like these fast notes, so let's change them up a little bit. Let's add some glitchy notes in here at the end of the first part to introduce the second part of the vocal hook. Just zoom in to edit these small notes. Now for the second part, let's do a different sequence of notes so that it stays interesting to the listener. And for the end, I want another fast sequence of notes to bring us back to the first part of the loop. Okay, so now we have a loop which sounds pretty good, and we are probably going to change some of these notes later on, but for now this will do. Now we can start playing with the knobs in the drum rack a bit. Let's see what a little extra release does to our sound. Well, let's have a very short release, since that works better for this very choppy, glitchy vocal style. So now it's time to spice things up a little bit. Let's start by adding an EQA to our signal chain. First we take out all of the low frequencies like this, and then we boost the high frequencies a little bit to bring that crispy high end a little bit more up front. Now let's add some reverb to this dry vocal. I use Rob Papen's rp-verb, which is a very high quality reverb with a lot of options. You can of course find the link in the description box below. So I was browsing the presets last week and found these two vocal acapella presets, and one of them sounded pretty nice. You can open up the preset list by clicking on the preset bar. And now let's see which one it was. There it is. Now we take the dry wet down to let the original signal back through, since we only need the reverb to sit nicely in the background of our vocal. Next, let's add a saturator to this track. We can use saturation instead of compression to glue our chops together a bit, and as well add a very subtle distortion. This makes them a little bit more gritty, which is nice, right? So let's put the drive up to 4 decibels. Now I think it's time to check if this vocal works with our current chord progression. Now, if I did it right, it should sound pretty good together, since all the notes used in the vocal are within the A minor scale, just like a chord. First, we only turn on the vocal and the main kick and snare to make a nice balance between them, since the vocal is obviously way too loud right now. So, in our saturator we can pull down the output gain a little. Just to show you how you can even process this further, I make a duplicate of this track and then I right-click the track and choose Freeze Track. This freezes the track and renders an audio clip in the background. You can do this to save you some CPU while you're working on an older computer. Now if I right-click the track again, I can now choose to flatten the track, which replaces the frozen track with the rendered audio clip. Now, you can chop this audio clip up again using the same techniques and nobody will ever be able to find out which vocal sample you've started with. So if I now play this, it sounds just like our MIDI version, just rendered out to an audio file. Now, I always like to check how this rendered audio file sounds when we reverse it, because sometimes this brings in new inspiration. This way you can also easily create a variation on an existing melody by just reversing a small portion of it. But for this tutorial I'll stick with the MIDI version, so let's delete this audio track. Okay, so now let's see how it sounds in context with the actual chords. Turn off all tracks except the chords and vocal and press play. As you could hear, it was definitely in the right key with the rest of the track. This is because we used the vocal recorded in A minor. So I think this vocal still sounds a little bit too cute. So let's make it a little bit more nasty and interesting by adding some more effects. So we can make this a little bit more distorted in multiple ways, but today I'll show you how to do it with a return track. Let's zoom in and dial in the send B on the vocal track, and now let's solo return track B so we can hear what it sounds like. Now we have a second signal which runs parallel to our vocal track. So let's throw a phaser effect to create a cool stereo effect on this vocal. We do this by making sure that the phase knob is set at 180 degrees and then we slowly raise the LFO amount. Sync it to the tempo of Ableton and find a right LFO speed. I think somewhere around 1 will do the trick. Now let's turn this into something more nasty. Put on a Redux device, which is Live's native bit crusher plugin, which also features bit reduction. With this we can reduce the bit depth of our audio to make it sound like 8-bit music, for instance. So let's increase the downsampling to reduce the sample rate of this vocal part. Also turn down the dry-wet control on the phaser to let some of the original signal back through before it's being sent through the Redux device. Now let's introduce another stereo effect called the chorus, just to make it sound even wider and introduce another variable that makes this sound a little bit more interesting. So now it's time to unsolo the return track and hear how it sounds mixed back in with our original vocal track. By doing this, we can make a nice balance between the two tracks. Let's turn the dry-wet and the feedback up on the chorus plugin, and let's also increase the send amount on the vocal track. This is all about finding a cool setting which introduces the nice stereo effect on this vocal to make it a little bit wider. So to glue this back together we can use a compressor like in the previous videos, but for this one I want it to be gritty, so let's do it with a saturator plugin. Let's turn the drive up to 4 dB again. to give it that slight digital distorted sound, and let's turn on soft clip to slightly clip the output. Now reduce the output level to your taste. In our device browser, let's find the Overdrive plugin and click the little arrow in front of it to see the available presets. We want the preset Enhance, which overdrives only the high frequencies to give it that very bright sound. So last but not least, I don't think I'll use this effect on anything else than this vocal. So let's select all the effects on our soundtrack and press Ctrl+X on your keyboard. Now the plugins disappear, but don't worry, you just cut them to your clipboard and we can paste them somewhere else. First, we got rid of the send amount on our vocal track, and then we add an audio effect track to our vocal track. In our audio effect track, we first right-click in the chain list and choose Create Chain. This creates an empty effect chain in the chain list. Now let's do this again to create a second chain, and now we paste the effects in this second chain. Now we can rename both chains so we can easily find them back, and we can use the volume of chain 2 as a send amount. Now we can really hear this grittiness coming up front. Let's add an EQ8 before the phaser and take out all of the low frequencies so we only get the mids and highs being affected stereo-wise and not the low end on the vocal. Well, if there is any low end on it. So let's see what happens if we turn the speed of the LFO on our phaser up to 1 second notes. So now we can close the audio effect rack and use our final mixed gel compression setting to glue the actual vocal back together and make it sound as one whole vocal. This also makes the vocal a little bit louder, which helps it punch through the synth that is playing at the same time. Now let's group the vocal track in a group bus that we call #vocals. All our vocals are going to be in this group to make it easy to find back. Now finally on the vocals group track we add an EQ8 to take out all of the low frequencies below 100 Hz and also boost those crispy high frequencies just a tiny bit. Now, finally I want to show you how I use a cool little plugin that I got from Dada Life called Sausage Fattener. This plugin finds its way in every track I make these days, and for only $29 it's very cheap. You can find the link in the description box below. So, what is Sausage Fattener? It's a tune-up compressor, maximizer and limiter plugin which increases the average volume of your signal. If you use it too much, your waveform will look like a sausage. And I mean, look at the guy's face. Who doesn't want a happy friend like that in his productions? So, I found out that this plugin works best when you use it at very subtle settings, so it only introduces a little bit more fatness to your sound. Of course, you can do the same with a combination of EQ, compression and limiting, but why make it harder for yourself if this plugin can do it with the turning of one knob? So, let's put it around 4% and see what it does to our final sound. Maybe you need to check this on good headphones or monitor speakers to hear the difference, since it's a very subtle effect. If you listen closely, you can hear that the reverb also got a little louder because of this, just like with a normal compressor. So let's copy this plugin and let's paste it on our other tracks too, to make everything just a little louder in average volume. The actual output volume stays about the same. Finally, let's also paste this on a drums track, and that brings us to the end of this week's tutorial. Thank you for watching this tutorial, and I hope you've learned some new things. Tune in next Tuesday for another episode of Tutorial Tuesday.